Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Hello/X/. As the subject says, I'm a serial killer that just a few days ago was found guilty of 2 of my murders. Sentencing is coming up on June 15th and will likely get anything from 20 years to life. But what this thread is mostly about is the fact that I got found guilty at all, or even investigated as a suspect to begin with. I believe that some occult or clairvoyant method was used by the police or judicial system outside of trial to confirm that I did it, and then the trial was interfered with to make sure I was found guilty. I know this sounds ridiculous, but I have no other explanation for why the jury found me guilty due to a lack of any evidence to speak of whatsoever. Up until the day we went into jury deliberation, I was set to get off scot-free. The jury was on my side, my lawyer was very happy with the outlook, and the prosecution had basically all but given up. But somehow that morning, everything had changed. It was like everyone in the courtroom wanted me to hang. Even my own lawyer seemed to have changed his mind on my innocence. Seriously, I had put in almost an entire year's worth of work in planning my murders. And by the time I moved forward with the crimes, I had already decided on 5 of my total 7 victims. Before the police got to me, I hadn't committed any killing in 8 whole months, so it's not like the killing only stopped when they zeroed in on me. I put so much work into just making sure I couldn't be connected to any of the murders, or that they'd even have an easy time deciphering them as serial killings. But somehow the police arrived on my doorstep, and within 3 months I was on trial for 3 of the total 7 killings, and I was basically on trial for all 7 because of the prosecution's inability to leave the other 4 out of the trial, despite multiple reprimands from the judge. I'm willing to answer as many questions as I can, but I will withhold some facts because I still hold out some hope for future appeals and possible exoneration. I don't blame you for not believing me. I wasn't really able to post much in the op post, because it was way too long and I had to shorten it. My trial and killings weren't really in the news because it took quite a while for the police to even realize they were serial killings. I had chosen pretty awful people with lots of enemies and run-ins with the law, so that the cops would zero in on people who had actual motives. I also kind of hoped people and police would be uninterested in even finding the killer.
If this is true, you would be able to post some kind of evidence. Even if your trial didn't receive broad media coverage, there would be a local news story, pacer reports from the trial, something. As of now, you've presented nothing that lends your claims and credence, so why would anyone bother playing into them? If you're being truthful, this would be a fascinating topic, but without any indication that that's the case, it doesn't seem worth the effort to establish a dialogue.
Well, I can't really do that, considering that it could be used as a clear admission of guilt in the other 4 killings if this thread got archived and used as evidence. And while no news station or anything ever really put forward as any of them being serial killings, I am suspected in all 7 by the police and, well now, convicted of 2 of those. But as I said, I think I might be able to get exonerated of those as long as I maintain my innocence. The Midwest, but I killed all over my state. I would have gone out of state, but in the event the police connected any of the killings, it would have then been in the FBI's jurisdiction. And I wanted to avoid that because their investigators are a lot better and have very good computer science investigation skills.
If you're mentally ill enough to serial kill people, is it possible you're also mentally ill enough to have issues with your perception? You're sitting there thinking you've committed the perfect crime and you appear above reproach, yet everyone else just sees a creepy guy who comes off like a serial killer. I'd say that's more likely than witchcraft being used against you. All that being said, ever seen the house that Jack built? If so, what did you think?
That could be true. I can't say I've never questioned my sanity before. Sometimes in my life I thought I had some sort of impact disorder or something, because people had very different reactions to things than I did. Although several years ago I just came to the conclusion that I was some sort of sociopath or psychopath after my brother died. There were so many people around acting like the sky was falling, but I just couldn't really relate or understand why they cared. Like, I get it, he was your son, boyfriend, friend, or co-worker. But considering all that, he was just a selfish prick in my eyes. No, I never saw that movie. Sorry.
Sounds like psychopathy. Can you describe what love or being afraid feels like to me? You should check out that movie before you go in. It's about a serial killer who fate just saves from getting caught time after time. Would be interesting to hear a serial killer's thoughts on the depiction of a serial killer.
The problem is, when I was a kid, I remember having a lot of emotions, liking girls, crying at summer camp because I missed my mom, stuff like that. But as I got older, it just got harder to feel things like that. And soon, towards my late teen years, it just boiled down to being frustrated or annoyed, and only being satisfied when I was left alone uninterrupted. I mean, I started getting pissed even when people compliment me as if I even cared about their approval. Even worse, when I was at school or work and there was workplace or social drama, and people expected me to play this stupid game of picking sides and shit-talking people the moment they weren't within earshot. Things got really bad when I stopped liking doing anything at all, and I thought for a few years that I was just insanely depressed. That's part of the reason that I started thinking about killing people, was because I hated interacting with people so much, but also had no reason to even do anything but work to live, and constantly be surrounded by what I thought to be crazy people. I have done a lot of research on murder cases and murderer trials to see how people got caught and what kind of evidence was used to convict or identify people. I quickly stopped looking at serial killer cases, though, since most of those were lunatics or perverts who only really got away with it because of police inadequacy or, as you said, fate or sheer luck. I'm starting to see that I'm not doing a great job at explaining myself. The buildup was a lot more complex than I can really put into words. And I will admit, unlike most people, that I do things and just kind of reason or rationalize my actions after the fact. I can't really explain why I wanted to start killing people or if it was inspired by anything I saw. But I can say is I really started to hate most people because of the stupid, awful shit they did on a regular basis. How they started drama on purpose and didn't really know why they did anything. And if they didn't have this pointless shit in their lives, they'd realize they had sad, empty lives with no greater purpose. A lot like me. But I was willing to admit it to myself.
You didn't answer my question. In your studies, did you come across the guy who stashed murder boxes all over the country in random places? That's how you don't get caught. You kill completely at random and have no connection to your victims. He eventually turned himself in because he got bored.
I looked at some cases where people hid the bodies, but I never came across that one. In many cases where people hid the bodies, there were cases where it was a family member, a lover, or someone who was abducted, but I never did anything like that. My victims were people who I'd be able to get a lot of information about them on social media and had run-ins with the law, so they also had public criminal charges and a fair few enemies who might end up taking the blame for it. I never had any reason to hide the body. I'd planned very carefully where I would kill them and how I'd get away, only really taking the time to retrieve the slug. As I said, I left no evidence behind. The only thing that tied me to the murders is that I used a black powder pistol, and there was black powder residue at the crime. The only 3 kills I was charged with were only the ones they could prove were done with a black powder firearm. But 5 months before I killed the first target, I actually faked overcharging the pistol and blowing it up in my hand. I put black powder burns on my hand and even took metal chunks from my gun and embedded them in my body and smashed up my hand with a hammer and went to an emergency room. They never questioned my injury, and the police never found the gun after it had been destroyed. All these reasons are why I'm at a loss at how I was found guilty when for most of the trial I was never pinned with anything that would stick, and the judge almost even threw out the case to begin with. But somehow on the final day where the jury actually decides if I'm guilty or not, literally everyone has changed their minds. My lawyer, my family, and the jury all of a sudden knew I was guilty to the bone, yet nothing that could actually prove that came to light. It took me a while to really settle in on any one person, but I settled with people that had done something to ruin another person's life. The second one was a woman who had forced her 14-year-old daughter into prostitution with some dudes to help pay off her illegal gambling debt. And another was a dude with 6 DUIs and had just gotten out the year prior for hitting a family with his car and putting the wife into a wheelchair.
Did I kill someone? When I was in high school, there was this kid who I really hated because he was a ridiculous overachiever. He had never gotten a B in his life. He was studying to be an engineer and planned on going to MIT once he graduated. He was also a musical virtuoso and was very interested in obscure history. He made many genuine attempts to befriend me, but I had a lot of trouble concealing my disdain for him. I resented him for making me feel stupid whenever he was nearby, and I held that animosity toward him for a long time. It was never intentional. He was never deliberately condescending, but still. At one point, while I was talking shit about him to a friend who was obsessed with paganism, Satanism, witchcraft, and the occult, he asked if I'd like to perform some rituals with him to manifest his downfall. And even though I never really believed in any of that kind of stuff, I said yes anyway because I was bored and it felt like a fun way to pass the time. We lit a bunch of candles, we held hands and recited incantations about illness and unhealth. Within a few months, that kid developed a glioblastoma multiforme that killed him in less than a year. He wept about not wanting to die very often. Watching him wither away so rapidly like that was one of the most horrifying things I'd ever seen. I still don't necessarily believe I caused that, but still, what a wild coincidence. I think human brains are built to disregard coincidence and seek patterns. What I did bothers me on a subconscious level, even though consciously I know I really had nothing to do with what actually happened. I should have just gotten over myself and been kind to him anyway. He was a very lonely kid.
I used to live in a busy apartment complex in Sao Paulo. It's not like American apartments, it's literally 40 stories, with each floor having about 25 apartments. Mostly college-aged people or young adults with family. I go to work after school on Fridays, so I come home really late, around 0100 every Friday. I live on the 11th floor, so I ring the elevator. The elevator comes, eventually makes its way down, and the door opens. I walk in. The elevator traffic is usually busy at night anyway, so I didn't mind the man who was in the elevator dressed to conceal himself. He had donned a ski mask and had black gloves. It's just him and I. As we are going up, I notice he has a knife in his hand that is dripping what looks like blood. There's a small puddle by his side. I ignored this out of fear and quickly exited the elevator once my floor was reached and quickly went into my place and locked the door. The news reveals a murder occurred that day. I didn't directly go to the police as investigations are inconvenient in Brazil, and I can't miss work days. A police officer comes and knocks on my door the following Tuesday and asks if I've seen anything to help the investigation. I tell him no, I didn't see anything. He thanks me for my time and takes off. A week later, they televise the suspect has been caught. It's the police officer.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
10 years ago, I took the train home from school. I'm 14 years old, tall and thin, very feminine, long hair and eyelashes, full lips for a guy, barely sporting chin fuzz. An older man with thinning, shoulder-length gray hair standing at the edge of the platform as I get off the train. Make eye contact. Has a weird statue-like vibe to him both in behavior and look, zero life behind his eyes. Face is gaunt with heavily hooded eyes and stern nose like a hawk, deep lines and straight-cut features, mouth pulled grimly. Think nothing of it. Take a regular mile route home, the majority of the walk is down a busy street. Realize after a couple blocks that the guy from the train is 10 paces behind me. Unnerved because of how close he is. Engage Virgin Speedwalk.exe. Start walking faster, take an unusual turn off the main road. He's still following me, keeping pace. Make 3 lefts, he starts keeping his distance but still following me. Manage to text my older brother, total neckbeard but built like a Scandinavian gorilla, and attends LARP groups that dress up as knights and beat each other with fake swords. He has a pretend claymore made out of an old pipe. He says he'll come out to meet me at a certain intersection. Look behind me quickly. Old guy is 5 feet away with this angry look on his face. Break into a run and see my brother, greet him, and he grabs my wrist and we walk home. Guy disappears but brother sees him. We get home, the police arrive minutes later. Brother called them. 2 squad cars. There's a gigantic guy with a bulletproof vest and shotgun. They question me. Turns out the police have a profile on him but no name or address. Guy preys on thin boys like me in the neighborhood. He's a prime suspect for 3 missing kids and a body, several accounts of him following kids and one of him trying to grab one but the kid got away. I'm a halfway decent artist. I do a sketch for them. They thanked me and left, telling me to be careful. About a year and a half later, in the middle of winter, I was 16 years old. Cold. Hanging out with friends that are druggies. I don't smoke. In the same neighborhood as last time. Mother lives in the neighborhood but father, who I was currently living with, lives about 2 miles away. In friend of a friend's basement, a total slum house. The guy has like 3 tanks for different lizards, holes in the walls, swords and guns hanging on racks. Bad vibes. It's a school night and 11 p.m. Tell them I have to go. They go outside with me. We all split up and I start walking 2 miles home, pretty much straight path again. The road I take home is mostly dark. Old rich neighborhoods with lamps that didn't work or never went on, only lights were at intersections. Block I'm on has tons of massive old pine trees that hang over the street. Getting feeling like I'm being watched. I'm a total night owl, frequently night walk. I have great night vision and never feel uncomfortable. Hair standing up on my neck. Walk past a tree, realize there's a man crouched under a tree as I pass it. After about 20 feet I hear him slide out from under it. Snow mutes most of the sounds. Cross the street instantly and start speed walking. See him walking about 15 feet behind me but on the other side of the street, his eyes locked on me. Guy is wearing a full camouflage suit, backpack and ski mask. Not good. Walk as fast as I can without running. After a block or two, look behind me as I cross a lighted intersection. The guy crossed the street and was maybe 20 feet behind me. Notice a glint in the streetlight. There's a goddamn knife in his hand. I'm not dying tonight. Unstrap my backpack and tuck it under my arm. It was heavy and moved around on my back, slowing me down when I ran. Break into a sprint. Really fast runner actually, unfit but was top 10 during a 100-meter dash among the sophomore class. Not even halfway home when I started running. Count 7 blocks when I slow down to a jog. Gasping for breath, chest burning. Realize both my nostrils are just running with bright red blood. Look behind me. Guy is like 50 feet away, jogging steadily. He's a persistence hunter. Adrenaline kicks back in. Sprint again, don't even remember breathing or running. Felt like a dream speeding home like a bullet, only the wind in my ears. House is actually 4 blocks off the road I was traveling down. Turn off quickly, run down the street and slide into my porch and lock the door, barricade myself inside my room upstairs. Coughing up blood, nose is bleeding, chest feels like it's on fire. Must have sprinted a mile in 5 minutes. Call the police and tell them what happened. They send a squad car to my house. Officer tells me they're doing a search of the area with several cars. Several hours later, they caught him a couple blocks away leaving the woods near my house. It was the same dude that followed me home. Cops tell me I'm lucky to be alive, thank me again for my help. A couple weeks later, it turns out the guy was a Vietnam vet with a bad reputation for crimes during the war, was responsible for several murders over 20 years and admitted to abusing his victims before killing them.
In her true crime book, The Stranger Beside Me, Anne Rule wrote about a period in their police department of hopelessness and incapability to solve an active serial killer's murders that, as it turned out later on, Ted Bundy was involved in. One time during that period, an astrologist had arrived at the police department and started talking about some kind of peculiar coincidences associated with the murders.
I had a phone call and a meeting with a woman who was an astrologer. "Anne, you're close to the police," she began. "I found something that I think they should know about. Could we talk?" She had been trying to find a pattern, an astrological pattern, in the case of the missing girls. "I've come across something. Look at these," she said. "The moon passes through each of these signs every month." She showed me an ephemeris, an astrological almanac, and I could see that the phases of the moon signs seemed to last about 48 hours each month. "All right, I understand that much, but I can't see what it has to do with the cases," I argued. "There's a pattern. Linda Healy, one of the victims, was taken when the moon was going through a Taurus phase. From that point on, the girls vanished alternately in Pisces and Scorpio moon phases. The chances against that happening, the odds are almost impossible. You think someone is deliberately abducting those girls, maybe killing them, because he knows the moon is going through a certain sign. I can't comprehend that." "I don't know if he knows anything about astrology," she said. "He might not even be aware of the forces of the moon." The astrologer had an envelope with a piece of paper that said, "If the pattern continues, the next disappearance will occur on the weekend of July 13th to 15th. It did.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.